If you were to do it again, what would you do differently? And what do you think were the main successes?
No, I'm happy with the way it went. So I'm happy with the way it went. I think a few things which I think were important for us is that, wherever your museum is, it isn't, and this is something which we emphasise with the board. It's not. You're absolutely dependent upon the wider world out there. So developing partnerships and friends with other museums, not necessarily local, was very important. So I've always also, in terms of our case here in Banbury, that this museum is indeed in Banbury, but it's part of Oxfordshire, it's part of the national scene, and it's part of the international scene. So developing your partnerships and friendships with colleagues around the world is vital, because the more contacts you have, the more relationships you have with other museums, the better. Absolutely. And everyone is, in my experience, is very eager to share skills and chat about what they're doing. So that is, I think in terms of our development here, that's been a very important philosophy, that we are part of a much bigger picture, and that we should be out there a lot. It's not, I think, as one thing I've learned as being a director is that most of my time really has to be talking to supporters. Yeah. So it's a communications role.
In many ways, it is.
Bringing it in terms of developing those relationships with other organisations and people. So I think when you look at your structure within a new museum trust, you need to think about all those posts that you are familiar with in a local authority and rethink them, because they're going to have different jobs.
Yeah.
Being a museum manager is not the same as being a director of an independent museum. It's completely different.
And would you say that building those relationships has been probably one of the biggest success points in this journey for you?
Yeah, it's been enormously enjoyable. I think it's been building, absolutely, because you are. We have, the museum has a broad group of volunteers, but who work in the museum, both as trustees and on the front of house team. But it's more than that. It's about building those people within the community who can support you financially, or you can talk to about your development plans. Because what we all want to do is to improve the offer that Banbury can provide.
Absolutely.
So
it's about at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah. So communications are really important.
What would you say is the one thing, if you had to pick one thing that you're most proud of in this sort of process?
It's very difficult to answer that, but what I do like, what I would say is that it's as a museum team, it's great how everyone works together, and we have a very happy group of people who are very eager to come to work, and I think for all of them the last 18 months have been very difficult because many have been on furlough, and I think for sure, without exception, all of us want to be here in the museum, doing what we do, which is opening the museum to the public, developing programs, working with our audiences, so everyone is very fired up and engaged in that. So what I find really exciting is, I think, it's just seeing that enthusiasm amongst everyone in the team who want to make a difference, and that's the really good thing. And indeed, that isn't just our floor staff. That's our trustees too. We're all very enthusiastic, and it's a very, very nice working environment.
This is a really important question. I would do it again, most definitely. I think the benefits for public value, and actually for people working within the organisation, in terms of the creativity, the innovation, the opportunities for development, are absolutely worthwhile, and they absolutely outweigh the challenges that you will face. And you cannot get away from the fact that there will be challenges, and you will need, in terms of your team and organisationally, you will need to develop, and you will develop your resilience to tackle those challenges and grow the organisation and grow what it does. It's an incredibly rewarding, it's an incredibly powerful set of experiences and moments when you're working with wonderful people across the piece to do great things. And I've seen people across the organisation who were probably not at their best, let's say, in the local authority context, who just came to life in the trust environment, and just really flowered and worked incredibly hard and found new opportunities for development within their sphere, beyond their sphere, and so on. And I think, what were the main successes? I think the main successes are that we have avoided a scenario where the local people of Hampshire would have found their arts, museums, cultural heritage shrinking in terms of its ability to be part of their lives. And I think what we have created, and we, in the hugely collective way, staff, volunteers, board of HCT, staff of Hampshire County Council, Winchester City Council, all the customers and stakeholders that came with on the journey, what we've created is an organisation that really gives hope to the future of, you know, culture, museums, heritage, arts, changing people's lives locally for many generations to come. And we could have lost that. We could have lost that. And I think that's probably the main success for everybody. And yeah, there are small things I'd do differently. I'd definitely, you know, be even stronger on making sure that the financial controls were there at the outset, so that we had really good knowledge. But other than that, I think, you know, there are always things you're going to do slightly wrong or want to do slightly differently, but the key outcome, everybody really achieved something, I think, quite special for Hampshire, and it lives to, you know, to deliver for future generations who they in turn will need to transform it into, you know, newly resilient. It's an ongoing process, I think.
The local authorities are currently looking into a governance review. How do you think things could improve at Gunnersbury Estate, and which models are you considering?
The local authorities are undertaking a governance review. I would say they're undertaking it at the prompting of the CIC. We've actually raised this issue with the local authorities. And the issue really is the sense of, when the local authorities created the CIC, they also created a parallel charitable trust called the Gunnersbury Museum and Park Development Trust. Very long, large business card if you're going to use that one. The council set the two bodies up for two distinct but linked purposes. Ourselves, as I've discussed, to actually run the service. The trust actually pull in external funding to assist in the ongoing master plan delivery. What we found, however, is that as a non-profit, we're also looking for grants, for example, largely for revenue, to support some of our revenue programs. We've encountered a number of instances where grant-making bodies have said, hang on a minute, why are you coming to us as a charitable trust? We said, oh yeah, but the charitable trust only does the capital stuff, we do the revenue. And they've said, that's slightly confusing. The charitable trust doesn't have any tenure here. So I hold a 25-year lease that backs off my 25-year management agreement. So the trust are going out to foundations and grant makers and saying, can you give us a very large grant to invest in the upkeep or the improvement of the assets at Gunnersbury? And they say, yeah, what land interest have you got? Oh no, we haven't got any. And so for very pragmatic reasons around how we present to grant funders, we began to have a conversation at board level between the trustees of the trust and the directors of our KIC that actually says we need to really ensure that we present as unified a voice and appearance as possible. We then dug a little deeper and said, actually, is that going to be sufficient? And also, are we really presenting as coherent a picture to our communities as possible? So it's not just simply about a pragmatic thing about we need to get grants. It's also a sense of what are we presenting to our community in terms of with whom do they engage on a meaningful matter? Do they engage with the trust? Well, they engage with me because they volunteer with me, because it's the KIC that's delivering services, so I've got 90 odd people that volunteer with me. You're not going to go and volunteer with the trust because the trust actually isn't delivering anything. So there's a little bit about there about who do you identify with. If you want to be a community stakeholder at Gunnersbury, which vehicle is best placed to deliver that for you? So we've looked at whether, in fact, we can blend those two organisations formally. So we raised this with the two local councils and said, look, in all good faith, you set these two parallel bodies up. It is the two bodies, the KIC and the trust that you set up, that are coming back to you jointly and saying, actually, we think we can serve the purposes that you constructed us to actually deliver. We think we can serve that better by being an integrated single organisation. And to be fair, both councils have gone, okay, that's a really interesting proposition. What they haven't done is become defensive and say, no, we set you up separately for very good reason and we're sticking to that. They have reiterated they set us up for what they thought at the time were very good reasons, but they are now fully engaged with us in looking to see whether we can integrate the two organisations. So we're in the midst of the process, as always. The two local authorities are fully bound into that process. So we have a reference group that consists of myself, the chair of the trust, the chair of the KIC, and the local authority representative from each council, working with an independent consultant to steer this process through. So the councils are absolutely bound into it. This is not about two independent bodies trying to achieve something without the local authority buy-in. The local authorities are now absolutely part of the process. They didn't originate the process, we initiated it, they have accepted that as a very valid process and now are fully bound into it. So what we're doing at the moment with the councils is exploring essentially whether the CIC becomes a trading arm of the trust. Because what we feel is that that model of charitable trust with trading arm is well known, well respected in the sector. It's known to funders and larger stakeholders. We've consulted Historic England on this, for example, and the lottery. Neither of those organisations have gone, oh my God, what are you doing? They've both gone, actually, we can understand why you're exploring this. So we are currently engage in that process to see whether we can integrate the organisation. Essentially, it's a form of merger, but the reality is that there's an interesting imbalance between the resources that either of those two bodies brings to bear. So, for example, the CIC has the management contract with the councils, and we have a staff team of 30. And a turnover in a good year, not COVID, of around about 2 million a year. The trust has no staff. It has one part-time fundraiser, no infrastructure, but what it does have, it has one charitable status, two charitable objects that are very close to our own, and 3, candidly speaking, local people understand what a charity is far easier than what a community interest company is. And we have suffered as a CIC in either confusing people to try and tell them what a CIC is, or reversing out of that and just by default almost allowing the council to the community to think that we're actually the council in disguise. And I have had levied at me, oh, well, you're just the council. I'm going, no, I'm not. But when I try and explain what I am, they kind of glaze over. I know it's rather reductive, but I think if we say, no, we're a registered charity, I actually think our communities would have a higher degree of recognition and understanding of what that is. And so I think we can get the best of both worlds here. We can get the trust being the headline body, a registered charity that communities, stakeholders and funders recognise, and the CIC as a trading entity which plays to our strengths, as I've said in previous answers, where we have this tension about commerciality and public service ethos, if you will. If we are very clearly a trading entity within the architecture of a charity which holds that public service ethos, I think actually the parts will fit together a little more easily than they currently do. That's the theory. We're working through whether that theory will pan out by doing a joint strategic business plan. So the 2 boards, the Trust and the KIC, are working with myself and an independent consultant to pull together a really strong 10-year strategic business plan that we can present to our communities and to the councils that actually says, if we can do this integration piece, these are the benefits that will accrue from it. So we have to have a business case for this. And it has to be driven by that business case. And the business case that is emerging is really positive. What's been absolutely fantastic about this is getting, for the first time, the trustees of the trust and my directors in a room working on common issues. Before, they had worked in these parallel worlds where I was the only person that actually linked them up. Now we've got director, trustee, working sometimes in small tasking groups, and it's been really good to show that we've now got much more value out of these 2 organisations than we had previously. An example being, most of my directors, majority have business backgrounds. On the trust, for example, one of the trustees has a 40-year career in museums, has an MBE, been awarded, has got an enormous richness of experience. That actually was missing on the KIC board. We're now able to reach in to our partners in the KIC, get that. If we can create a blended board as part of the integration formally, I actually think we'll have a stronger organisation. We will have the business acumen, the commerciality of the CIC, and we will have the mission, charitable ethos and expertise of the trust. And I think we can be much, much stronger coming out of this.